I went on a mission to grow my faith and my spirituality, and I came home depressed and gay. So if you're still a member of the church, I'm going to ask that you don't watch this video just out of curiosity of my experience, because I'm going to be very open and talking about things that contributed to why I don't believe that the church is true. And I don't want to be any kind of catalyst to anybody's faith crisis. Believe me, I still wish that there were things that I hadn't seen, hadn't read. My life would be a whole lot easier right now if I hadn't heard or if I didn't know these things. And I know you're probably like, oh, my testimony is so strong. There's nothing she could say that could shake it. Bet. Because I was there, honey. I get it. So I will just give a disclaimer. Please, please, if you're still an active member of the church and you want to remain an active member of the church, please don't watch this video. But thank you for the support anyway. Never in a million years did I ever think that I would leave the church. I wanted to be like mission president wife, like hella Mormon, like wife to a prophet. I was like, I'm down for that. That was always something that was important to me, because I didn't grow up in a home that was super active, but even with the pieces of the gospel that I had, it brought me a lot of peace. And I felt like I had this roadmap carved out for my life. But the irony is, once I actually started to dive in, you know, I served a mission, I went to BYU, I married another member. The more questions that I asked and the more knowledge that I gained, the more doubts that I had, and the more things that were brought to light that as a teenager, you're not really diving into, you know, the deep history of things, but as a student at a university, you start to learn things and you're like, I don't know how well that sits with me. That kind of changes a lot of things of how I think about the church and early church history and how it was founded. The whole faith crisis kind of started the day before my mission, actually. I had never been to Utah before, and my mom and I were touring Brigham Young's house with some kind of like guided church tour. And the woman was, you know, showing the house, and she's like, in this room is where Brigham Young's wives slept. And I was like, wives? Like plural? And I actually asked her, I was like, wives? Because I didn't know that polygamy existed in our church. And maybe that's on me for not being raised where we really talked much about church history. But in my head, and tell me if this is something that you'd heard before. This is something that I had heard somewhere, or maybe I just made it up. But what I thought was that after the prophet Joseph Smith died, the church kind of split up into two sects. So like one followed Brigham Young, and that was us, and then one followed Emma Smith and his son, and those are the people who were the ones who did polygamy. We didn't do that. So I was like, the heck? And she's like, yeah, you know, because, you know, back in the early days of the church, we were polygamists. And I was like, I was so mad. I remember walking around Temple Square after that with my mom, and they have like this statue of like Joseph and Emma, and I'm like, that's a freaking lie. Like, she was not the only one. And I doubt that she felt really good about having multiple sister wives. And that so much didn't shake my testimony of the church being true. It just was kind of an anger issue within myself that I hadn't been taught that wasn't more obvious in our church history, and something that was spoken more about. Because here I am about to serve a mission for my church, and I'm gonna be out here looking like a fool when people are like, your church was polygamous. And I'm like, no, we weren't, because we were. And trust me, a lot of things like that happened on my mission that I realized they were right, and I was defending something that I was ignorant. I didn't know. So that kind of started, that wasn't really my faith crisis, but it was my first, whoa, that's something that I did not know, and that really upsets me. Then during my mission, as I'm actually reading and learning, and keep in mind, everything that I'm reading here at this point on my mission is church material. Like, these questions that I'm having about my faith from this point on during my mission were all from things that are readily available to any church member. I remember I was doing a personal study in the morning, and my companion and I had both been reading the gospel topic essays, more controversial church topics that the church wants to explain in greater detail. And so I was reading about the Book of Abraham. So for those of you who don't know, of course, we have the Book of Mormon, which is another testament of Jesus Christ. I'm not going to get into all of that. There's other videos you can watch. But basically, we have the Book of Mormon. We also have something called the Pearl of Great Price. Within it is the Book of Abraham. Yeah, same Abraham who, like, in the Bible, sacrificed his son that Abraham. And we were always taught that Joseph Smith had found some old ancient papyri from Egypt and translated it, and it turned out that it was an additional account from Abraham, and that he was talking about his experience of his life, and so we took that to be scripture. And as I was reading the account from our church in the gospel topic essay, it talked about, well, you know, Egyptologists have proven that this isn't actually, you know, a correct translation. This is actually a papyri that had funerary texts on it. And this was really upsetting to me while I was reading this, because I thought, this is something where in the book of Abraham, he says, I, Abraham, am writing this on this piece of paper, and they're saying that's not what it says. So number one, I'm like, well, maybe it was an inspired translation, or like, maybe, you know, you're trying to put the pieces together of what makes sense. But then it also says in the words of Abraham, and I'm also going to include hieroglyphics and like these pictures of what happened to corroborate my story. But then Egyptologists also debunk this, and they're like, this is just like text of like funerary texts. This has nothing to do with Abraham. Like, the gods that he's naming are not even real gods in Egypt. Like, this is obviously just a bunch of BS. Whoever took this, like, bamboozled everybody. And the gospel topic essays don't really word it like that. Of course, they say, even though most Egyptologists say that this isn't a real translation, just like the Book of Mormon, you have to read it to feel the spirit that it's inspired. And I remember finishing that essay, like going into comp study, and it's like, I don't like what I just read. Like, a text that I was told was scripture written from Abraham, I didn't even know that it had been proven that these are just random ass papyri from some museum that Joseph Smith got a hold of that actually have nothing to do with Abraham. I didn't like that. That was really, really upsetting to me. And it was funny because my companion ended up reading it too, and she's like, Sister Brett, what if the whole church is just fake? And like, you say things like that as a, like, and as a missionary, that's like a really big thing to say. And we sat there like kind of awkward for a little bit. But then like, what do you do? Like, that's not a conversation that you are ever prepared to have or think about. So we just like, haha, we have faith, it's fine. And you move on. But inside I was really troubled. I was really, really freaking out, really upset. But I didn't want that to affect my faith, because here I am as a missionary trying to teach other people that the church is true. And now I'm having my very first experience where I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like what if this isn't true? Like, what if there is no explanation for this? What's hard too is that on my mission, I was struggling with a lot of these things. And then I was called to be a trainer. And I was like, ugh, crap. I don't want to be a trainer because I'm having my own struggles, honey. I don't want to have to be like the leading testimony and like main missionary companion. Like, I don't want that. I'm struggling. I don't want to train. And I think my trainee could feel that. She didn't like me very much. And I think it's probably because she could tell that I was phoning in a lot of stuff. Because I was. And after that, after training, then I was called to be an STL, a sister training leader, which basically you just go around to the other sister missionaries, you go on like exchanges, and like you go out with them. And I had so many sister missionaries coming to me and saying like, honestly, Sister Brett, I'm struggling because like I'm having some questions about the church. I'm like, bitch, same. Like, I can't help you. And I would, you know, I felt like I was supposed to be more uplifting and helpful. So I'd be like, oh yeah, like, it's normal. Like, pray about it. Like, the answers will come. Like, the church is true. Don't worry. But inside I'm like, you're a liar. How are you lying to this girl? I was lying to myself too. So I didn't know what to do. So the ending of my mission was a little bit shitty because I didn't want to be there anymore. I did not want to be any kind of guiding light to any other missionary struggling because I was in the trenches myself. So I didn't want to do it anymore. But I figured if I studied more, if I had more knowledge, if I dove deeper into it, I could also be like the Mormon apologists and have all these answers and have reasons for the puzzle pieces that didn't make sense to me on a lot of different topics that I'm not going to get into, because again, I'm not trying to throw all these drops and bombs on people, because that's not what I'm here for. But for me, I thought, okay, I'm just going to go ham and I'm going to like study, and I'm just going to like do this. I'm gonna study, and then I'm gonna have the answers, and then it's gonna be fine. So when I get home, I'm just gonna like go to BYU and like study religious history, and like it's all gonna be fine. But also on my mission, there was another discovery that I made that was also really hard for me. This piece had to do with an attraction to girls that I had, and I always used to say like struggled with, because that was the way that they would word it, like you're struggling with same-sex attraction. Because I'd always been boy crazy. Like I loved boys, love boys, like present tense, but also the same way that I felt for boys was the same way that I felt for girls. And I always felt so wrong about that. Like I hated that I had those desires and those feelings. Like I wish I didn't. And then serving a mission, you know, you get to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, like I could see myself. And I never had any feelings for any of my companions or anyone that I served with. They were definitely more like sisters to me. I didn't have any attraction to them, but you're living 24/7 with another woman. And I'm like, hey, this is great. I get along so much better with girls than I get along with guys. We're together all the time. I could 100% see myself raising a family with another girl and having a grand old time. Men are dumb. I don't need men. Also because I'd had, you know, not great experiences with past boyfriends, relationships, people in my life. So maybe there was a shade of that too. But it was really on my mission that I was like, oh gosh, like I knew that I had this tiny attraction toward a lot of the girls that I knew back home, and was trying my best to like shove that down. But then to be a missionary and to still feel like, oh my gosh, yeah, like I could see myself living with a woman. I could definitely see myself pursuing this life. It's like, that's not what you're supposed to be figuring out as a mission. Like I went on a mission to grow my faith and my spirituality, and I came home depressed and gay. So that wasn't really what I had signed up for. And if I had known that looking back, I would have gone. So I get home and I'm like, okay, all of these feelings that I have, all these questions that I have, they're solvable. I can solve this. I can fix it. I'm going to go to BYU and I'm going to have the best time figuring all of this out. And I kid you not, the week that I got to Utah, I met who would actually become my future husband. And it's crazy because at that point I was like, I hate guys. Like I really, and for 18 months, you're not allowed to think about boys, talk about boys, have any kind of interaction with the opposite sex. So at that point, I wasn't even thinking about it, but I met him and he was charismatic and funny and charming, and also just as devout as a member of the church as I was. So very quickly I was like, well, you know, if I am going to be with somebody, he's the kind of guy that I would want to be with. And I think I partially felt like too, like, okay, if I get married to this guy, I'm not gonna have feelings for girls anymore because I'm married, and then I'm not supposed to have feelings for anybody. So that wasn't any kind of motivating factor. Like I really did fall in love with him, and he's the most amazing person. But I think there's also that little piece in my mind, like, okay, once I get married, like it's gonna go away. These feelings are gonna go away. Everything's gonna be fine. Anyone knows that that's not how that works, but I was really hopeful. Now, plug in also at the same time, I'm going to BYU and I'm taking a ton of church history classes because I'm thinking, gosh, I've got to study this stuff. I want to learn, I want to understand. And I took a Joseph Smith history class, which was amazing. And by the way, Professor Grant Underwood, he shouldn't be watching this. I really hope he's not. But he's the best professor. Love him, love him, love him. And he's so open. Like his testimony is so strong that there's no shady part of church history that's going to sway his beliefs. And so I really appreciated that he was really open with a lot of things that happened in church history that were not glittery and shiny and, you know, part of the narrative that the church puts out. He's like, yeah, this stuff happened. This wasn't a good look. Probably not a good idea. For him, it was fine because he's like, yeah, well, he was a prophet, but he made big mistakes, you know? For me, I was like, well, if he's a prophet, Shouldn't God be telling him to not do that? Like, if I'm supposed to believe in a prophet, I'm also supposed to believe that God is inspiring this person. So how can this person be making huge mistakes if he's really a prophet of God? Like, that, those pieces didn't fit for me. And this went on for years, up until the time that I graduated BYU. I was trying to learn more, I was trying to understand more, but it wasn't answering my questions. It wasn't having the result that I thought that it would have, which is really hard because shut up, bitch, you're fine. Bad bitches don't cry, bad bitches don't cry, bad bitches don't cry. You know, I was doing the very best I could with the knowledge that I had, but I was starting to feel very lied to and feel really abandoned by God, because I had been crying every single night for like years, begging, God, please, please answer my prayers. Please make sense of this. And even if you can't give me like answers, let me just feel peace, right? Like, I don't have to know why such and such happened. I just have to feel that it's okay. And 7 years went by and I never felt that. I never got that peace and that confirmation. I started to feel like God had abandoned me. And looking back, it's because I know that it's the path that God wanted me to go on, but I did feel very betrayed for a very long time by God. Eventually, I realized that I had to tell my husband about what I was feeling. And I had dropped hints every now and then with things that I was learning in classes, and he was always very supportive and nice when I would bring up little things like that, but he was never like, oh, me too. I think maybe in the back of my mind I was like, oh good, like maybe he's like struggling too, and I'm gonna bring this up and he's gonna be like, oh yeah, I thought that was weird. But no, like for him, he had always had super strong faith in the church, never had a question, was always a very good boy. So those things never bothered him. So I knew that if I was gonna tell him that I didn't believe in the church anymore, I honestly felt like he's gonna divorce me. And he had every right to do that, right? People who get married to other members of the church are getting married because you want to raise your children that way. You want to have that family. And so I wasn't what he signed up for. And I knew if I tell him this is going to change everything. And he's either going to accept that I don't believe this anymore, and he's going to still want me to put on the facade, which I was fine doing, honestly, because I didn't want to lose him. Or he was going to say, I can't be with you. So I told him, and I was so afraid. I was terrified. And he was kind and supportive and patient, but he said, you just need to study more. You just need to do some more research on this, and these things will make sense. And it's like, bruh, I've been doing that. And it hasn't helped. And like, looking back, he was trying so hard to be helpful in the best way that he knew how, but he was ordering me all these books that are like, what to do in a faith crisis, and like evidences for the Book of Mormon. I'm like, there are none. Like, these books aren't helping me. But I was a good wife, and I read them, and I told him I was reading them, and I'd like show him notes. I'm like, look at this. But I knew that wasn't going to solve anything in the long run. And I felt so bad because I didn't want him to have to struggle with this or suffer with this either. But it's a different situation because he's my husband. This isn't just like a friend or family member. I'm like, I don't really care what they believe. Like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have children? Like, we have to be on the same page about this. And a few months go by, and just randomly out of the blue, he's like, Rachel, I think you're right. It's like, I'm always right. Right about what? He's like, I don't think the church is true. Where did that come from? And then he told me that he had read what I sent him, which was the CES letter, as one of the many things that I sent. And at that moment, like, it was a moment that I always felt like I would be celebrating when, like, I could get him to know what I knew. But honestly, in that moment, I just felt so guilty because I'm like, I've just taken everything that this man has known his whole life, and because I don't want to live it anymore, I like have purposely made him read all this stuff that has exposed the truth of all this, and instead of feeling happy, like, I feel really bad about it because I didn't, like, I wish that I didn't know these things, And to be honest, and maybe this sounds bad because I'm supposed to be enlightened and all this stuff, but I wish that I still didn't know this. I wish I could live in that perfect Mormon bubble and have all those pretty little beliefs like tied up in a little bow and know where I'm going and know what my purpose on life is. Like, I wish I did. I'm sorry. Some people leave the church and they're like, it was the biggest eye-opening experience. I'm like, no, this shit is hard. I don't like it. I want to redo. I literally would pray that I would like get hit by a bus and have amnesia and wake up and like be Mormon again. And like not have any questions about anything. But now at this point with my husband, it's like there's no turning back now. We both know what we know. And once you know that, even though there's so much appeal to the church and so much good, it doesn't change all the things that just doctrinally, fundamentally, it wasn't founded by inspired men. I cannot say Joseph Smith was a prophet. I can't lie to my children and tell them that because I don't believe that. I don't. I'm at this place now that, you know, it's been a few weeks since we've, you know, kind of had our conversations about what our morals look like. What do our standards look like still? You know, even out of the church, you have to like, okay, but like, what are the rules for our marriage? You know, obviously there's a lot of things to be talked about still, and we haven't even gone through that whole process of, I'm not even gonna get into it. The point being that there's still a lot to figure out, but I do know that I still believe in God and I believe in my Savior. I do. There are times that I have felt him so strongly, and I know that he exists. I know that he's real. I don't know exactly what that looks like. I'm kind of like, I'm not into any kind of denomination right now, probably ever. I don't really know what that looks like, but I'm trying. I'm taking it one step at a time, and it just makes me so sad because when I came out and I said that I was leaving the church, so many people are like, oh yeah, it's so nice to take the easy choice, or like, you just want to be a whore and dress immodestly. Like, I wish it wasn't because there are doctrinal things that fundamentally I know this is not a church from God. I know it. And it doesn't change that I've had amazing experiences with people in the church, and I love people in the church, and I think they're incredible. But that doesn't make something true. Wow, this video is actually very therapeutic for me. I feel good. I cry a lot still, but I'm good. Anyway, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. If you'd like this video, be sure to smash that subscribe button.